All right, so now I'm joined by Walter O'Neill. You're the manager of the sculpting department here. So as we were talking with Tom, he talked about the blueprinting and the conceptual process, and that gets handed off to your team, the sculpting team. Now you work with a whole team of sculptors. It's
Correct.
Not just you doing all the sculpting, right?
No, I wish, but no.
That's the stuff you like doing, though.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through the beginning of the sculpt?
Sure, absolutely. When we get designs from the design department, Tom and Dave, it's up to myself and a couple more people in the sculpture department to determine exactly how we're going to go about taking that design and making it a real world 3D object. Depending on what we have asset-wise to start out with, we might decide it might be easier to go digital if it's something that we already have an existing model for. Mm-hmm. But if at all possible, we generally like to keep things traditional because it's the most straightforward process.
So for example, if you're doing like an Iron Man sculpt, you might have the 3D file that Legacy Effects or some studio has. They pass it over because you have the license, and it's easy then to get a 360 view. Right?
Absolutely. And in those cases, there's nothing more accurate than the thing that they actually used for the movie. Mm-hmm. So trying to remake all of that by hand with the tolerances that we need, it's reinventing the wheel for no reason. So in those cases, yes, we would go with digital assets first. But in other cases, if we can go traditional, chances are we will go that route if we can.
So here you have an example of something that's in the works. Now, I'd love to learn a little about its character and where it is in the stage of the sculpting process.
This is Court of the Dead, Death Supreme. So this is Death himself. This piece is actually a concept sculpt, meaning that in this current form here, it will not be product. What we're doing is using this as kind of a roadmap to work out all the bugs and little hiccups and pitfalls that we might run into in order to make a larger version, the quarter scale piece. So we kind of check the tires and work out any kinks here, and then translate all the good and information that we glean out of this into a larger format piece.
Okay, and this looks like it's been worked on for a while. Is this several months' work? Is that?
Actually, it's about a week, 2 weeks worth of work.
Wow. Okay.
This was done by a very talented sculptor named Simon Lee, who is lightning fast with doing this kind of work. Very quick, very expressive, very gestural, and really setting the tone for what we're going to try to achieve in the larger piece.
So when you look at this, as manager of its team, at this point, what is your feedback, and what are you going to go back to the sculptor and say you want to tweak, and how does that collaborative process work?
Yeah. Okay. So normally when we look at a piece like this, we're determining what parts of this piece are actually going to be sculpted, which parts are going to be fabric, how many pieces does this need to de-engineer into in order to not lock up any molds and make this thing easy to produce when we actually do the full piece.
All right, so you're going to give us a little demo. The material you're using Super Sculpey.
This one, this is actually done in Chavant.
Okay.
Which is a little bit of a firmer clay, but it doesn't harden.
And that's important because you're going to be tweaking it.
Yeah. This piece we don't care because we're never going to mold and cast this piece as is. Mm-hmm. We're just going to use this as a roadmap to refer to. So it's just always going to exist in this particular form.
All right, Walter, so what are you going to tweak on this sculpture?
I'm just going to add a little more material to the base to kind of continue the theme that we've got going on here with the writhing skulls that we've got. Everybody tends to have their own tool set, and half the tools you end up making yourself just because you see there's a need, and you might not be able to purchase the tool that you want, and you can see it in your brain. It would be great if I had a tool that did this, so you just end up making your own, cobbling it together. When
your sculptors are working on intricate details, do they ever feel like they have to hold back on a certain detail because of the production process, because of the molding process, or do they just have free reign to make something as awesome as they want, and then it's your job to figure out how that's going to get turned into the product?
That's an excellent question. Really what we do is we try and determine on the front end how deep we can go with details and how many pieces we need to break something apart into in order to carry that detail and fidelity through the process. So we know ahead of time that if we want to do something that's got like a deep undercut like this piece up here, this piece will have to be separate and removed from the piece, otherwise there's no way that the mold will be able to successfully capture all that without locking up, not being able to pull it apart.
All right, so you've done a little work, Walter, here, and this is just an ongoing process. It's iterative.
Yeah, absolutely. It usually takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months to make any kind of sculpture. This one came together pretty quickly for the original sculptor who was working on it, but in general, it's a very long very long process.
And what does the sculpture look like when you're ready to pass it on to the paint team?
At the end, it'll be a finished piece that's fully assembled, but we'll also have all the engineering built into it so we can then disassemble it into the various parts.
All right, so we'll bring in the paint department
Yeah.
to talk about their process. Thank you so much, Walter.
Oh, my pleasure.
So now I'm joined by Anthony Mestez. You're the manager of the painting department. We're talking about the conceptual design, the sculpting, but really people admire the paint work. And it works with the sculpting.
Oh, most definitely.
For the finished piece. So when your department gets a cast statue, it's in pieces.
Right.
It's something like this.
Right.
Now this is just Sculpey, but it's basically this texture and this form. And how do you go about in directing your team into turning this into something that's vibrant and full of color?
Yeah, I mean, basically what happens is once the piece has been sculpted, it goes into a mold cast process. They'll mold it with silicone, cast it in resin. We get an exact duplicate. The parts are broken up for production. So we have head, arm, body, because we can't work with the entire piece like that. So once it comes into to us, we will make the call on what parts that we need to assemble. Sometimes we'll assemble the whole thing and paint it. Other times we'll leave, say, a portrait, say like this Batman, where it's been keyed to go into the body. We'll leave it off because it's easier for us just to paint the portrait. And then once it goes into assembly, it'll just key right in and fit seamlessly in. But yeah, we get the parts, we end up going through them, gathering our reference material. We start the process and we use everything from hand brushing, and we also use air brushes, you name it.
Is it a layered approach, really?
It definitely is. I mean, depending on the character, for example, when you're doing like a human portrait, you have to layer, you have to get that realistic look. So you're dealing with flesh, and the thing is everybody knows what a human looks like.
Yeah,
so,
you know when it's off.
Yeah, so you really have to think your way through that paint job, not only to create the paint master and the prototype, so it looks good, but you also have to take in consideration how is this thing going to be produced overseas.
Right, so here you have like the Baroness, and that's supposed to be someone fairly lifelike.
Right.
And behind her you have Joker, which is still a portrait to some extent, but it's hyper real.
Exactly.
A little exaggerated, using bolder colors, and that's all under your purview.
Right. We definitely, with a piece like this, we're open to interpretation to an extent. I mean, DC is only going to let you take it so far. You're not going to redo their core character.
Hair's got to be green.
Exactly. He's not going to have purple hair and a green face or something like that. So, but as far as interpreting this character, I mean, as you see, his teeth have that rotted look, and he has the blushing in his cheek, and it's most people think, well, he has a white face, but you definitely have to go in there and draw out the life and the character in it. So blushing up the cheeks and around the nose and adding that highlight into the eye and the sparkle, and there's very subtle shading and highlights that
different type of paint for the eye, so it reflects it a little more.
Yeah, I mean it's usually the same type of paint, but the thing is at the end when you put a gloss coat on,
okay.
So you'll paint it. The mouth, you get a subtle sheen on the teeth, or the gums will be nice and glossy where the teeth might be semi-gloss, and the eyes high gloss to kind of put that spark of.
So you're taking texture into consideration.
Exactly. I mean, it's not just pigments, but it's also, you have to think in terms of, the sheen. If you look at Baroness, her chest plate, it's almost like a car finish. If everything was the same sheen, it wouldn't have that much impact on the final piece.
So I got to imagine, like with sculpting, it's a collaborative process. It's a team of people working on one sculpture, one product. And so if someone's going to be, their expertise is going to be in the portrait, and maybe someone's expertise is going to be in the prop painting, and then how do they work together to make sure it's consistent?
It really is just collaborative, and everybody works hand in hand. And like you said, some people are, their expertise is portraiture, or another one would be hard mechanical type lines. So
right, Gypsy Danger here from Pacific Rim.
Yep.
It's there's a lot of layering texture work to make it look weathered and like metal.
Yes, yeah, most definitely. And I actually have the most fun doing that type of stuff. I think it kind of just takes me back to, model building as a kid, doing spaceships and everything. And
is that how you got into this?
Yeah. I've been building models since, I was 3-4 years old, believe it or not, with my grandfather, and it was the old monsters and Aurora kits and dinosaurs, and I still have those models to this day, so that's pretty awesome. But that's how I got started in this. But
when you're building one model, you're building, you're painting it once. It's for your one finished piece.
Yes.
But when you're designing something to be mass produced for several hundred pieces,
right,
and where you're not going to be individually painting every single one, how do you develop the process so someone else can take what you've done and replicate it perfectly?
And it's funny because some people think that we actually paint every single piece. I can go to Comic-Con or something and
they're hand painted.
Yeah, and
but
they're
it's
like,
just
oh,
not...
so you paint every? And I'm like, no, that's not quite how it works. But to set up for production, we usually do two. We'll do a in-house prototype, which is the piece that we keep in-house, kind of like, that's our core sample. And then we do another piece that goes overseas into production, and that's their sample piece that they end up building their paint scheme off of, replicating ours. Because when they get it, they have to break it down and figure out how they're going to be able to do it. So we have to kind of think in the same terms of like, are we doing something that can be replicated?
So do they determine the order of operations?
To an extent, it depends. I mean, we set it up, but they definitely have to go in and interpret it on their end, because their paints are different. The way they approach certain effects or applications, they do it a little bit differently. Where we use a lot of water-based paints, they use a more durable enamel and some lacquers and stuff, because it has to hold up. So when we develop it here, we do have to take it in consideration and go, are we pushing it a little bit too far? Do we need to go back? Is this something that they'll be able to replicate? For example, some of the lines and the decal work and everything, we will have to generate files through our graphics department, and we generate those files that carry over into production. They replicate them. They have to apply decals, and just like a model kit, they have to do decals and stencils and everything, and that's pretty time consuming, as far as a production piece.
And they're professionals also.
Yes,
and you fly over there, or people from your team fly over there to maintain a consistent quality, to make sure that what they're doing is almost exactly like what you're doing.
Most definitely, because when they generate, they look at our piece, they'll generate their paint master, and then it goes into production onto the line. So we definitely have to keep an eye, do QC, follow up on what's going on overseas, and making sure their paint is matching our paint to the best of their ability. And they do some amazing work. Sometimes it's a little bit tough too, but the results speak for themselves.
Yeah. What's your favorite to work on? What's been one of your favorite pieces?
Recently, I worked on one of our H.R. Giger alien busts. I always have fun painting that stuff, and I think that one was really enjoyable. But I'm hard pressed to say which one is my favorite. There's a lot of them. It's like kids, like.
And it's something, like you said, you've been doing since you were a little kid, and now it's something that you get to not only do for a living, but also to share with the world.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Anthony,
thank you
for sharing a bit of your painting process and what goes into to bring these to life.
Yeah.
And we'll have more amazing behind-the-scenes look at Sideshow Collectibles on Tesla.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel right there on the link. I'm Norm. We'll see you next time.